This is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. You know, every Friday we take a break and Tony Joe comes in the studio and we talk about the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money and talk about how to save money on costly car repairs, really everything that you need to know about dealing with your car. Why we did this, in fact, he did this with my predecessor, Don Spear, is when he started. He joined me back in 2002. And the reason we do this program is because your car is probably one of the most expensive assets that you'll have in your lifetime. And want to make sure that you're making good choices and good decisions. And the only way to do that is by getting you information, and just like we do Monday through Thursday on Prudent Money. So if you have any questions at all, you can always go to info@prudentmoney.com for Tony Joe. We'll try to get those questions answered for you. And if you have any questions of me, please go to same thing, info@prudentmoney.com, and send it in. I'll get you taken care of. Hope you enjoy the program.
KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, KYJC, Commerce, and KMWC, Bethany. Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, common automotive repair myths that you might want to watch out for. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Tony Joe's here with me, as he is every Friday, to take your Car Corner questions. I do have a line open if you'd like to call in. 1-877-913-5357 is that number. If you got a question for me, please go to the website, and you can send an email at info@prudentmoney.com. and we'll get you taken care of. That's off the website, www.prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5357. Tony Joe, how's it going?
I am gracefully blessed to be here sharing this time with you today. How are you?
I like that, gracefully blessed.
Mm-hmm.
I had to let that just soak in for a second there.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey. Stick with me long enough, you'll have all kinds of...
Yeah, that's what scares me. So let's talk a little bit. You know, there's got to be tons of bad information about car repairs, myths about car repairs on the internet. And I went out and I looked for a list of the top 10, and I want to get your opinions on these. The first one is, and we of course, we talk about this all the time.
Another test.
Is the one of the best things you can do for your car was change the oil. But they say the myth is that you need to change your oil every 3,000 miles. And they go on to say it should be every 5,000 to 7,500 miles. But even that, I don't think is really necessarily always true, is it?
No, it is not. Let me explain why and what I see in real life, real world conditions. That is, you can have a vehicle and the maintenance records or the manufacturer may indicate an oil change every 7,500 miles. In my opinion, that's way too long, but it is present on some vehicles. They do recommend that interval for oil changes. Now, they have to find a happy medium because cars now, global, all over the world, everything can be sold. They got to try to find a happy medium between the weight of oil and the time interval between oil changes that meets criteria for almost any place in the world that car can end up. Now, that's a difficult thing to try to do, and it's not always good for some people, and it's not always good for, in this case, us. Now, we live in a pretty warm climate. The summers are brutal, and the heat is intense, And 7,500 miles between oil changes is way too far to go. Now, having said that, let me explain why. You can have an oil change at 7,500 miles, and uh, after let's say 60, 70,000 miles, the car's powertrain management is out of warranty, and all of a sudden you're going to need a new engine. Nobody cares about that fact except you, the individual that's going to have to shell out the money. But the EPA is happy, and the manufacturer is happy. Everybody's happy about advertising the fact you go 7,500 miles between oil changes. The truth is, there's hardly anywhere that I can think of where that's going to give you longevity, good performance, dependability, and longevity, which is what everybody's looking for in an automobile. If you got to change the engine after 70,000 miles, then that's not really that good of a deal. So, let me just say, 3,000 miles used to be the standard between oil changes. We've kind of developed better oils, and we also have added better materials and better technology to the engine. So 3 to 5,000 is still the general practice, in my opinion. And there's another thing I want to add to that is 3 to 5,000 miles is a little too long to go on even some vehicles. And let me explain why. A lot of these turbocharged vehicles now, many cars are turbocharged. They're smaller engines, but they have turbochargers to give you the boost in the performance. So a 4-cylinder kind of acts like a 6-cylinder. Well, the problem with that is that turbocharged turbine is spinning, 10 times what the engine RPM is going to be spinning at. So you have to keep in mind that turbocharger needs good quality, clean oil at all times. If you take out a turbocharger, that's going to be pretty expensive. I mean, it's not exactly like ruining the engine, but it's not cheap to fix. So I recommend 3 to 5,000 miles and get the filter changed as well. The filter can only hold so much hydrocarbon material that turns to sludge, gets washed into the oil, which then is deposited into the filter. And when the filter gets full of contamination and can no longer hold any more contamination, there's a spring at the bottom of the filter that will lift up and completely bypass any filtering advantage at that point. It's just going in one end of the filter housing and out the other end without going through the filter. Now, you don't know that because you're just driving your car, but that's essentially what happens. That's why I am a firm believer in general rule of thumb, 3 to 5,000, somewhere in between. If you hit it at 4, great. If you hit it at 5, great. If you hit it at 3,500, still great. So that's my belief, and the reason I'm bringing that up, Bob, got to remember it's my opinion only, but it is an opinion formulated over 45 years of watching real-world occurrences on changing oil. So it's somewhat of an educated opinion.
So it's said another way. I mean, it depends on the climate, depends on where you live. So why don't car manufacturers print that out, be a lot more specific, or is there's first thing that comes to my mind, there's liability if they get specific. I don't know if that's, putting an average is an easy way to get around everything, but you would think that they could devote 2 pages in the book, the handbook in the car, that says if you live in Texas, we recommend 3,000 miles.
Well, yeah. Now, warmer climates. Now, let me explain. There is some degree of scrutiny when you look at really closely at some of the specifications, and there are cases where it says 5W30, or 5W20, unless you live in a sub-zero climate, things like that. They say use 0W20. So They do make a few cases for that. What you're trying to say is, why don't
right.
they say that? There's a very few places in the maintenance records and in the information from the manufacturer where they do specify if colder climates below X degrees Fahrenheit use a different oil. But not very often. Not a lot of cases of that, but I have seen it.
The second one on our list is premium fuel is always better for your car. Now, you could see, obviously, why people would think that, but this list calls it a myth.
It is a myth. Premium fuel used to be a thing. Now, you got to go way back. It used to be ethyl and regular. And this was back in the days when there wasn't even unleaded fuel. Ethyl was a premium fuel that you could use. Some people used to call it premium. Well, it has long since gone by the wayside when premium fuel is even necessary. The reason they offer it is because still a few car manufacturers, a few high-end cars will require premium fuel only. And I'm not going to go against what the manufacturer states in black and white. Usually you'll see it on the gas gauge itself, or you'll see it on the gas cap when you open it to fill it.
Aren't those high-end cars mainly?
Mainly, but still, I'm not going to go against what they say, but the reality of it is you don't need to use premium fuel, especially in most cases. Generally speaking, 87 octane. That is the cheapest price on the pump, and that's the one that you should use. Now, I want to make a great big stipulation on what I just said. Premium fuel is a higher quality fuel for a variety of reasons, octane and some other things that, without getting into a bunch of stuff that I can't explain about, scientific liquids that burn better in combustion chambers. But I will say, when I say better fuel, use 87 octane. That is the cheapest of the three prices. But I don't mean some of the low-end stations where you can buy it for, 6 cents a gallon cheaper. You need to use a good quality fuel, preferably a name brand, a good name brand on a top-tier list. But you don't want to use the premium. You want to use the 87 octane, but you want to use, mention some names, Exxon, Shell, Mobil. You want to use a good quality fuel, but you don't need premium. You can use 87, and you don't need anything else unless your car specifically states that.
Okay, the third one is you should always replace brake pads in pairs. Now, let me give what they say is the myth. While it's a good idea to replace brake pads on the same axle at the same time, front or rear, it's not necessary to replace both sides if one side is not worn out as much.
That's what they say?
That's what they say.
Huh. Well, I can see flaws with that. That's AI?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm not too impressed with that. Okay, let me explain why you do brakes in pairs. It's a very simple, general explanation, and that is if you have, let's say, better brake pads, thicker brake pads on one side and thinner brake pads on the other side, then you would probably experience a pull every time you hit the brakes.
Makes sense.
Now, that's why you do them in pairs. And doing one side, I guess there are exceptions. If you had like a brand new brake job and then a week later your car was involved in an accident and one side got smashed up, could you put just new brake pads on the one side? Maybe. But generally, no, in my opinion, that is not a true statement. You don't replace one side only on brake pads. There, AI.
You stumped AI, huh? If your check engine light is on, you need to stop driving immediately. Now, I want to add something to this. Because my check engine light came on last week. I can't tell you my lifetime how many times I've seen that. Not too many, but I was trying to think back. What's Tony Joe say about this? So I call you, and I was telling you about it, and you go, just drive it around for a little bit, and it'll probably go off. And sure enough, I drove it around a little bit, and it went off.
Well, I did. Let me back up. I didn't say it would probably go off. I said it could go off. And the reason I'm defending myself that way is because I don't want people to think they can just ignore the check engine light. Because you don't remember everything because, you got tons of things to do. But I said, Bob, it could be the weather. If you remember, it was getting cold and then warm and then cold. We'd have cold days, cold nights, and then it'd get up to 80 during the day. To tell people, just generally, let me explain, you could have a small O-ring seal or any kind of a seal or any kind of a fitting in, say, the evap or the evaporative emission system of the car, which every car has now. And due to cold weather and hot weather, it can shrink the seal, contract during cold weather, expand during warm weather. And you can have these little isolated incidents where the computer may pick up a small leak in the evap system. Well, 3 days later, it gets up to 80 degrees, and all of a sudden, the seal starts to seal again due to expansion. And after so many drive cycles, the light will go out because it sees that whatever was leaking has been corrected, even though there was nobody did anything to fix anything. It was due to weather. And I've seen that a lot. That's why I suggested, wait, let's see what happens. Don't get nervous. It may just go out. And it did. So I'm going to assume that your car had something like that going on. Now, going further with the check engine light. Check engine light comes on for only one reason and one reason only, and that is if anything alters the tailpipe emissions other than the factory specification that it was designed with. So if anything out of the tailpipe pollutes more than it should for any reason, the check engine light will come on. Now, without being mechanics, some of the guys that may be listening might know what I'm trying to say. I mean, it could be a million things. However, if you were to have a check engine light that came on and your car was not displaying any drivability symptoms, I mean, it's not misfiring, it's not hesitating, it's not doing anything different. The light is just on. Okay, then you don't have to be quite so concerned. You can give it a chance to see if it goes off by itself. It takes a while. You can't just expect it to go off tomorrow, but in a few days, if all of a sudden your light goes off, then you may have had anything from a gas cap seal that didn't get tightened good enough to a small computer glitch that it didn't recognize something. I mean, there's so many things it could be. So I would tell people that if the check engine light is on, it might be okay to not get nervous and bring it in and spend money on it. Give it a chance. See if it goes out within a week or so, or maybe 10 days. That's if it's not displaying any symptoms. Now, if it's displaying a drivability problem, like it doesn't want to go good, or it's misfiring, or it's got a big hesitation when I take off from a red light, or some physical symptom, then you might want to think about getting that thing checked out tout de suite, as we say in France, because that could lead to a problem, and you especially don't want to have a check engine light on that's flashing. Remember, we talked about this. If it's flashing 1 pulse per second, that indicates a catalyst damaging misfire. You could have a bad spark plug or a coil or some minor problem, and if you let it go, it's going to end up damaging the catalytic converter, which in some cases is very expensive to replace.
So do you speak French?
I took French in high school. Tout de suite is the only thing I really can remember from 2 years of French class, but, when I know words, I like to throw them out there.
Yeah, it just caught me by surprise.
Do you know what it means?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so the magic fuel additives can clean your engine.
Yeah, I'm not real big on that. What do they say? Is it a good or a bad thing?
Says
Curious.
myth. Fuel additives claim to clean your engine or improve performance, but many of them have little effect on modern engines. Best way to maintain an engine is thorough regular maintenance and using quality fuel.
Okay, cool. I agree with him on that. Now let me explain why. All the magic, add this to your gas tank kind of products are pretty much ploys, merchandising ploys to get you to buy it. A lot of it you can read before you even buy it. You can pick up the can or bottle or plastic jug, whatever it comes in. Read the ingredients. If it's got alcohol in it, we don't need to put it in our gas tank. Why not? Because we already have enough alcohol when we buy gas. And if you'll notice on the pump, a little sticker that says may contain up to 10% ethanol is alcohol. And in some cases, it's more than 10%. However, since we don't have a choice, we have to buy the fuel that's offered to us at the pump. Me along with everybody else. So what you got to try to avoid is adding any more alcohol. And if the fuel injection cleaner or the magic liquid you're going to pour in there to solve a problem contains alcohol, just don't use it, because alcohol actually is detrimental to a lot of the fuel system components. It will take them out. It'll take out a fuel pump eventually. It'll take out an injector. It'll take out some of the parts in the fuel system that are going to be rather expensive, so that $12 can of stuff you thought was going to help you make things better ended up, in the long run, it won't happen immediately, but in the long run, it could end up costing you thousands of dollars. That's a no-no. I agree with AI on that one.
The next one is you can save money by ignoring the air filter replacement.
No. Nope.
Yeah,
Now,
that's what they said.
okay, well, now here is the thing about ignoring the air filter replacement. How does a person that doesn't know anything about a car know if the guy comes out from the shop and says, we're changing your oil and you need a new air filter? How do you know what a dirty enough air filter looks like? Or are you going to have to educate yourself somewhat on a very simple thing, and that is air filters. They're different shapes and sizes, but they're pretty much the same logic behind it, and that is if you can look through it and see daylight on the other side, chances are you don't need an air filter. If you know how an air filter works, you will see a great big coating of material on the part that enters the air filter, and that's the one that's going to get really dirty. And then the inside stays somewhat clean so that it can catch the debris in the air, filter it, and then allow it to enter the engine. It's bad to have dirty air going into the engine. You can do a lot of engine damage that way over a long period of time. So I would say to a person that's not knowledgeable about cars to simply look online. There's thousands of pictures. You need to know, what does a dirty air filter look like? How dirty is too dirty? Because it's subjective, Bob, like a lot of things.
Right.
A little bit of debris on the outside of the air filter that you can just tap on the ground and knock it off doesn't necessarily mean you need an air filter. But if you really have a bad air filter, you don't want to keep using it. You do want to buy one, because that dirty air, it'll choke off some of the air. It'll restrict the airflow. If you restrict the airflow on a modern computerized engine, it's going to start reducing fuel. It's going to coincide the amount of fuel with the amount of air it's seeing coming through the mass airflow sensor. So if less air is being passed through the mass air sensor, it's going to tell the computer to give it less fuel in the fuel injectors. That's going to give you a reduction in power, and it's going to give you, in some cases, if it gets bad enough, a rich running engine. It'll run rich. You'll start burning fuel that you don't need to waste and putting more gas in it than you ever had to. Used to be I could fill it up and drive all week. Now I fill it up twice a week. Well, don't let that dirty air filter cost you all kinds of money. Recognize or learn what a dirty air filter looks like. It's very simple. And then when advised to replace the air filter, make a judgment for yourself based on your knowledge of what a dirty air filter should look like.
Now, there's also one or two other filters that you should change, right?
One is the cabin filter. Now, cabin filters are kind of like the air conditioning filter in your home. The air goes through the cabin air filter, gets cleans the pollen and the mold spores and all the pollutants, and then it blows fresher air through the ductwork to your chest or floor, defrost, wherever you have it coming out. If you let that thing go and aren't aware of it and it gets plugged up, it'll start reducing the amount of volume of air that's hitting you. Let's say you had it set on chest vents. It's a hot summer day and you're like, oh, that feels so good. Well, as the filter gets dirtier and dirtier and dirtier, that air blowing at you will get less and less and less. You'll have to put your hand closer and closer to the vent to feel the air coming out. It'll also strain the blower motor. It will cause the blower motor to draw too much current. When it does, it starts to burn the blower motor out. So it can cost you money. That's why you need to know, do I have, not all cars have them, even to this day, but most cars do. So do I have a cabin air filter? Where is it? Can I change it myself? Many of them are very simple. I'll agree, some are not, but most of them are. It's very simple. You can buy the filter and put it in yourself. Just follow the instructions in the owner's manual or look it up online. In many cases, they're going to charge you $50, $60 to put a cabin air filter in. You can do it yourself, and you can buy the filter for $12 and install it yourself. These are things that we try to help people save money on. This is information that we try to convey that saves money.
Absolutely. Good information, Tony Joe. This is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.